Well, good morning. My name is Mrs. Danzy, and I'm from Heifer International, and I've come to tell you a couple of stories today. First, I want to say thank you very much for having me here, and also I love your mountains. I'm from New Jersey, and as you probably know, it's pretty flat there, so it's really fun driving here. A little bit different, though, from the mountains in Peru. So once upon a time, there were fifth graders at a school near Pittsburgh that were studying Peru. And they learned different things. Now, where are the fifth graders? Raise your hand if you're a fifth grader, and raise your hand if you're a fourth grader. So I know who should have all the information already. And they were studying Peru. And they were studying things like, what is the capital of Peru? What's the capital of Peru? In the pink shirt? You can even cheat. On this one, you can cheat. What's the capital of Peru? What's the capital of Peru? Cusco? Okay. Lima. Okay, so the capital is Lima. And did you learn what the population is of Peru? What's the population? Okay, 29 million people. And how many people is that? How does that compare to Pennsylvania, do you know? It's more, and it's actually more than 2 times. It's about 2.25 times the population of Pennsylvania. So that's kind of interesting, like when you compare it to the whole United States. And there are a lot of people, there's a lot of wealth in Peru, but there's also a lot of poverty. And in Peru, in general, the poverty is under 25%. But in the areas where we do our work, in the rural countryside, the population is about 50%. So that's pretty huge. So if you say 1 in 2 people don't have enough to eat. And so back to this 5th grade at this school. So they made bracelets, from what I understand, and then they sold those bracelets, and they actually raised enough to give 10 llamas to Peru. And that's a huge thing. It's not like we're helping 10 families, because the way Heifer works is that every family that receives an animal, they are required to pass on the first female offspring to another family. So the 10 llamas that you gave, they're just going to continue to be gifts as families that receive them are passing on the first female offspring. So anyway, I just want to really say thank you for all that you've done. And I want to show you a little clip about someone who did give an animal, and I understand some of you have already seen this. I guess I'm not going to be able to show you Alton Brown. Normally it comes up with a little... Okay. How many of you know Alton Brown? Kind of a scientist and a chef all in one.
So crops grow. It's like giving someone a small business because all of those products, the milk, the wool, the eggs, turn into income for medicine, school, clothing, a better home, a sustainable livelihood. And the animals produce livestock because, you know, animals make baby animals. That's what they do. Try that with a tractor sometime. Anyway, the next thing you know, the family is passing on the gift, sharing the animal's offspring and the training that came with it with another family who does the same thing. And so does the next family and the next until pretty soon you've helped to lift a whole community out of poverty. Cool, huh? See, Heifer International isn't just about animals and training. It's about the amazing things that happen when people realize they can stand strong all on their own. Like the resourcefulness and skills they discover, the communities they grow, the attitudes that change. It's amazing. Suddenly, hope happens. And it's like somebody turned on a switch. And you know what else is amazing? It's the power you have to make the lasting change happen all over the world, every day. That's where my commitment is. And that's when you start with one gift to Heifer International, a gift that grows, and maybe the best, hardest working gift you'll ever give. And that, my friends, is a recipe for lasting change.
And that's what you've begun. You've begun that chain of giving that it gives when it helps lift many families out of poverty.
So I want to tell you a little bit about Heifer and where we started. We actually started back in the 1940s. In the 1930s, there was a young farmer. He was in his 20s. Do any of you have family members that are in their 20s? So you kind of know who this person was. I'm not sure what kind of music he was into, but he probably was into music just like the people that you know in their 20s. And he went on a trip to Spain. There was a war going on in Spain. It was a civil war. And his group was actually giving out milk. They were taking powdered milk, mixing it with water, and they were giving it out to both sides. And they were making what's called decisions of triage because they didn't have enough milk. And so they were actually deciding of all of these starving people and children and babies, who was going to get milk and who wasn't. And he felt pretty hopeless. He just really couldn't, stand that this was the situation. And being a farmer, he came up with this scathingly brilliant idea. And that was, rather than giving a cup, you can see up here his quote was, not a cup, but a cow. So rather than giving families or people a cup of milk, he thought we should be giving them the whole cow. Now, isn't that pretty crazy? If you think about if you've ever done any volunteer work at your food bank, rather than giving somebody a meal, sending them off with a cow, that's pretty crazy, isn't it? So that was a huge idea that he had. And the interesting thing to me is I think I have scathingly brilliant ideas every day, but to really make something happen takes a special kind of person. And he was able to come back and make that really big idea he had happen. And he was able to organize other farmers in his area and people in his community to actually give cows. And that was
the beginning of Heifer. So our first, you still hear me? Yeah. So our first cows actually shipped in the 1940s, and they went to Puerto Rico. And since that time, Heifer has expanded to a lot of other animals, livestock animals.
Has expanded to a lot of other livestock animals. I've been to some of our projects, and some things that you might not even consider to be livestock animals. I was in China and I saw silkworms. Would you think of silkworms as livestock? No. And I've seen camels. Would you think of camels as livestock animals? No. And fish. So we've really expanded a lot over these first days. And this is where we are today. So we started shipping animals in the 40s, so that means we've been operating over 70 years. And in those 70 years, with help from students like you, we've been actually able to lift up 25 million families. That's a huge number over those years. And that equates to about 115 million people. But the challenge is that there are still nearly 870 million people in the world that don't have enough to eat. And so we still have a lot of work ahead of us. And so we really need continued help from your school and from the fourth graders who I know are going to be doing this project next year. Who are they again? Great. So thank you, fifth graders, for what you've done this year, and thank you, fourth graders, for what you're going to do next year. So here are a couple of pictures of Peru. And unfortunately, I could not find a picture of, I was trying to find a picture of a youth with a llama. But for those of you that know about llamas and know how feisty they are, you probably understand why I wasn't able to find that one picture. What we have here are some of our projects in Peru. We have the top left-hand corner are a few women that are part of a women's group that have gotten together. They formed a cooperative, and cooperatively they produce yarn and then products and sell them. The middle and the right-hand picture are pictures of llamas, and what else? There's a couple of alpacas in there, which are cousins to the llamas, but they are definitely a different kind of personality animal. Also in the lower left-hand corner, in the middle, one thing that's really important in heifer, I mentioned passing on the livestock animals. Another thing that's really important is passing on the training, because without the training, you can't really take full advantage of what the animal produces. And so here, there are these women who are part of that project up in the left-hand corner, more women from that group, they're actually passing on to the next generation how to make the wool and then how to make products of it, scarves and hats and gloves, those kinds of things. And then the right-hand corner is a young family that they've already started lifting up their family situation in the community that they live in, and the livestock that they're working with are actually pigs, which is another animal that we use in Peru. So who can tell me a little bit about llamas? And why is it good for a family? What can you tell me? They don't. Yeah, they do help a lot. They don't eat much, and what they eat, they have this uncanny ability to eat scrub grass that no other animal would eat. And when they help, how do they help? Okay, great. The wool. Exactly, transportation and carrying. And then there's one more that you're not going to really think of back in the green chart. Yep, they're good at protecting other animals, so they're kind of like guard dogs. Can be used as guard dogs. And one more thing I'm thinking of. In the very back there.
They can produce milk. They can produce milk.
They do produce milk. Actually, just about every female animal does produce milk, other than like a chicken or a bee or something like that. But I wasn't really thinking of that. I was thinking about the other end of the animal. What were you gonna say? Yeah. You can eat them? I don't know. That was what I was thinking. Okay, the black t-shirt. Fertilizer, exactly. Fertilizer. And it's kind of interesting, one project where I was, the kids were talking about, and all this is a lot of times through a translator, but they were calling it Miracle Grow. So definitely makes a huge improvement on the crops. It makes them grow better, and it also makes them more nutritious. So again, I want to thank all of you, and I also want to tell you something that's pretty surprising. So the first time that your school was involved with Heifer was in 2003. And since that time, so the whole school district has been, the fifth graders have been involved since 2003. And since that time, over $13,000 has been donated to Heifer. So that's just a huge amount of families' help. So I just want to really thank you again. And do you have any questions for me? You raised enough for 10 llamas. So that was, I'm not sure, per school. Right.
So in Washington here, we raised enough for those.
Okay, for 2. No, I'm sure somewhere, and maybe not even from the early days, because you have to think back in the 40s. There were farmers that were getting together and they were taking the livestock to a place, like to a holding area where it had to be in quarantine at somebody's farm before they could ship it on to the country where it was going or where it was going here in the US. So I'm not sure at that point what kind of records they have, but probably more recently we have that information. But I don't have that information. Okay. Ask me the easiest one. You know what, I'm going to have to, you know what I can do? I can take Senora Brown's email address and I can send that to you. I don't really get involved with the purchasing of the animals, and today what happens is the animals are actually purchased in country. And what that does is that helps lift up the economy of that country in another way versus shipping the animals here from the United States. So we don't really do that anymore. And also the animals are better suited to those countries and the climate, the strains that are already there. But I can email that information. Okay, and that would actually be kind of a generic number, as I said, because in each country it probably would be different where those animals are being used, how much they would cost. But also in that number is the training, because we never provide an animal without the training. And the kind of training we get into is not just, how do you prepare the pen for the animal, and how do you possibly grow the food for the animal, or how do you get that food, but also after you have the animal, how do you care for it, and then how do you make those products? And beyond that, how do you market those products so that you can get income from them? Evolution. What inspired me to do Heifer International? That's kind of interesting. I actually started out from college working in high tech with computers and networks, and was really a technical person. And I happened to take a vacation to Tanzania. And I'm an outdoor person. I backpack and I hike and do those kind of things. And when I was in Tanzania, part of my trip was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I got altitude sickness on the way up. This is kind of a long story, sorry. But while the rest of my group was summiting Mount Kilimanjaro, the group that I was with, they were trying to find other things for me to do. So they said, oh, would you like to go see an African farm? And I was like, sure, that sounds like fun. I didn't really know what it was that I was going to see. And we were delivered by bus to this woman. Her name was Mama Anna. That was how she was introduced. And she took us and we went on a little hiking trip of her community. We saw her farm, we saw her neighbors' farms. And as we went, she was explaining about the cows, because the cows were not really native to Tanzania, and people weren't really drinking a lot of, or using a lot of dairy products, the native people. So this whole time she was explaining about how the women had gotten together, similar to that picture in Peru. The women had gotten together and they formed a cooperative where they pooled the extra milk that they had to produce dairy products. And then part of their business plan is they were reaching out to the tourist hotels. So maybe one of the hotels similar to where I had been staying as a tourist from the United States. And that was how they were generating money. But so that's kind of a long story about how I was introduced to Heifer. And then I came back to the United States. I had never heard the word Heifer before, Heifer International. And everywhere I turned then I was hearing Heifer. And the last time I was getting my hair cut, and I picked up a magazine while I was waiting, and it was a Heifer magazine. And I was like, okay, I get it. And that was, kind of the start of becoming a 10-year volunteer with Heifer and eventually coming on staff. Long story. Yes. Well, that's kind of an interesting question because we have something called cornerstones, and the cornerstones are required in every project where we work, and one of the cornerstones is passing on the gift. And there are a lot of things around like caring and sharing and full participation of all of the people, the men and the women in the community. And it seems to I think that the hope that Alton Brown talked about that people get, that people become like very different. We have some video clips where women talk about before they were part of the Heifer project, this was a project in Nepal, how they didn't share anything with their neighbors. They would rather throw it out first. And then that particular community, there was a tragedy somewhere in the world, and they started saving their extra rice. I don't want to think it was China or one of the Asian countries. So they started saving, each woman was saving a little bit of extra rice from her family. And this was this was early days when they were trying to build a better life for themselves. And they took all of the grain and they sent it to this other country where there had been a tragedy. And there are cases where, similar cases where there are tragedies, and project communities will come together and they will donate some livestock that they have to another country. Yes, so over the years, we've also done work in the US. The work that we do here in the US is a little bit different. It has been in the past animal-based, but right now the work that we're doing here is more about working with communities to help them build business plans, to help them build infrastructure so that they can, within the impoverished communities where they are, really, make a difference for themselves. But there have been some very interesting things here in the U.S. One of my favorites is in Arkansas, there was a group that was Native American Indians that were given sheep. And the sheep were actually raised by the local 4-H group. And, passed on, there was a big ceremony, passed on to the Native Americans. So a lot of different work here. But where we're working is always in the rural communities. Because I don't think they'd like to have a cow in a condo in Pittsburgh. So I think our time is up. Again, thank you very much. And I hope you all have a great summer.